just preparing to live stream. Gesundheit. Okay. Says it's now live streaming, but let me just check. But it's working because this is actually the first time we're doing it. So we're definitely doing something a little bit new. Okay, perfect. It's working. I can hear myself, just what everyone wants to hear. So then I would say
now you're muted.
Yep. We're all good. Everything is working. Over to you.
Okay. We start?
Yeah, I think we're good to go.
Okay, cool. So super exciting. This is our first PyLadies Hamburg and Berlin meetup this year. We've done this in the past. And yeah, and so just in case people don't know what PyLadies is a community all over the world with chapters everywhere almost. No, in many places. We have over, I think, 250 chapters. We should put that picture with all the chapters. So we are basically in 250 cities, countries, and so on. So it's an international mentorship group with a focus on helping more women become active participants and leaders in the Python open source community. And yeah, so it's, as I said, we have a Slack that anybody can join. So it's here, the link, slackin.pyladies.com. And here there's all sorts of channels for job offers, learning questions, helping each other. People are helping each other on different topics. We have a City Hamburg and a City Berlin channel that you can join to hear news about new events. And we have 2 codes of conduct in Hamburg because of sometimes people were not sure whether 1 code of conduct is enough. So we expect all participants today to our events and in the community to abide to the Lady Nerds Code of Conduct. So the PyLadies Hamburg has 2 codes of conduct. I think PyLadies Berlin has only 1 code of conduct, if I'm not mistaken. But so the Lady Nerds Code of Conduct is that So we follow the Lady Nerds Code of Conduct because we are dedicated to providing a safe, inclusive, welcoming, and harassment-free space and experience for all members and guests, regardless of gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, disability, physical appearance, socioeconomic status, body size, ethnicity, nationality, level of experience, age, or religion, or lack of. So we do not tolerate harassment in any form, and we will prioritize marginalized people's safety over privileged people's comfort. And if you feel like something is happening during the event, please reach out to either me or PyLadies Germany, or we have so Maria Jose here and Anna-Marie. So we have a lot of people from the PyLadies community that can help. And in PyLadies Hamburg, we are currently 3 organizers. Anna-Marie, she's here in the room, and Avara Stewart. And yeah, you can follow us on LinkedIn, and we have a website and so on. We will have some meetups next month. So the next one will be in September at ThoughtWorks in Hamburg. It's going to be about, it's going to be a workshop on running SQL in Python and Python in SQL. So, DuckDB, Fugue, all of that for all the people that, don't like pandas. They prefer SQL to pandas. So there's those people. And we will also have in October Query AI workshop with Stephanie, and November prompt engineering with Samina. And also the January meetup is prepared, and we will hear about it. So stay up to date, meetup, global Slack, or LinkedIn. And we apparently, yeah, Berlin, sorry. Jessica.
All right. Hey, folks. Hopefully my Wi-Fi is going to hold out. I haven't got my video on because I'm in the middle of a forest somewhere. Sorry. Thanks for bearing with me. I'm representing today PyLadies Berlin. We were founded in 2013. We're just shy of 3,000 members, so please share with everyone you know. As we mentioned already, it's chapters all over the world, and we have 4 chapters in Germany, but we're trying to grow this. So if you're sat somewhere else in Germany and you want to start a chapter, please reach out to us. Next slide, please. In the Berlin chapter, we're running regular meetups with mostly talks, but sometimes workshops. We sometimes do full-day workshops that can range from tinkering around with microcontrollers to getting started with Python. We have these setup events which help you get started with coding or get Python running on your machine. We're trying to connect people with companies and network, and basically anything we can dream and realistically make happen is our goal. So next slide. We'd love you to join us on the PyLadies Global Slack. If you click through a few times, Teresa, this will show you how to do so. So we already shared the link. Teresa already mentioned it. But basically, these are the steps you go through. You accept the invitation once you put your email in, and then if you click one more time, you can join different channels. So of course, we're City Berlin, but there's also City Hamburg, there's also City Germany, or it might just be Germany without the city prefix. Next slide, please. So the Python community can learn from you. Wherever you are on that journey, we would love to have you speak at one of our events. We pride ourselves as being one of the most welcoming communities for being able to come along, share your knowledge, whatever, wherever you are, if you're beginning, if you're intermediate, if you've been doing this for years and years and years, that is surely something that you can share. It's a great place to practice speaking, on knowledge sharing, and who knows where that might take you. We have speakers that have gone on to then be at conferences, be keynotes, and do all sorts of exciting things. So if you want to join us, the QR code here will take you, the one on the right takes you to the speakers forum. The one on the left is for companies. So if you'd like to host us, if you're based in Berlin, we're always looking for spaces to run our workshops in. Next slide, please. And really just to hone in on this point of like, we look for all content. So a lot of the time it can be very overwhelming to give a presentation, especially maybe on technical topics. But what we really love is the introduction of our non-coding superpowers series. It's a lightning talk, so around 5 minutes, and it's talking about foundational skills. So that might not be the hard tech skills, but the very important skills that you need in this industry. So that might be salary negotiations, that might be preparing for interviews, CV preparation, that might be how to handle mindfulness when you're under a lot of stress. And this really can be anything. So if you're interested, reach out to us via either Slack or the email, and we'd be happy to talk with you, support you in putting together your presentation. We also run dry runs for our speakers, and then we give you the platform. Next slide, please. So also similar to with Hamburg, we're a small team of volunteers organizing slightly more than Hamburg, but nonetheless, it really takes as many hands on deck as possible. So if you'd like to get involved, you can give a talk or a workshop, you can help us organize a meetup, you can be a coach, you can join our organizing team. We meet every first Monday of the month online to talk about what needs doing for the next month. We really encourage you to bring your creativity. So if you're someone who likes to do social media, or maybe you like to create data graphics, we have all sorts of things, all sorts of ideas, and you're more than welcome to come with them. Please don't come with them as like hard requests. But if you come and you want to do it, then you're more than welcome. Next slide, please. So our next meetings, we have a hackathon on September 17th. So that's like very open, bring your project, come along, sit with your community, work on your project and network. And then on October 11th, we have the I Am Remarkable workshop. So that will be, I think, a 90-minute workshop looking at how you can build a brand and how you can advertise yourselves. Those will both be in person. We do try to do hybrid we try to do hybrid meetings wherever, but the format of these next two does not fit so much the hybrid format. So unfortunately, they'll be in person only, but we do tend to try to do hybrid events, and you'll find all of them, all the previous recordings on our YouTube channel. Slide, please. Teresa?
Yeah, I moved the slide.
Cool. I think you want to take back over.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure if my network is,
I can. Okay.
Is holding
cool.
Now.
Thank you. So yeah, so announcements. So there's the soon coming up only maybe until September 15. The call for proposal is still open for PyLadies Con. This is going to be an online conference, December 6th to the 8th. And I think Maria Jose can say something about it because she's an organizer. I don't know if you want to say something about it.
Oh, awesome. I was not expecting that, but yeah, sure. Yeah, we are organizing this conference to encourage the different PyLadies to be together in a conference that will be multi-language, multi-time zone for more than 24 hours. And of course, the call for paper is open until September, as Teresa was mentioning. But before the conference, we're going to have other events helping first-time speakers. We're going to have some workshops and different activities. And yeah, just looking forward to see all your proposals. And of course, if you have any question, very happy to answer any questions that you can pop up. Thank you.
Thank you also. And oh yeah, apparently you can create your own PyLadies avatar going to this link. This is a community project. So I will give people a moment to copy the link. Maybe copy link. I will post it on Slack. On Zoom. Okay, so today's meetup is book discussion on humanizing data strategy. We have Tiankai Feng, the author, and in the room, and Yasmin Herman, she authored the foreword. So, so we will have a conversation about the book, and then there's going to be also a Slido link for anybody who wants to ask questions from the audience. We ended up going for Slido because the event is streamed on YouTube, LinkedIn, different YouTubes. And I don't even know, I don't think we stream on Twitter. Twitter is dead. And so, yeah, so we give people from wherever the opportunity to contribute with questions. So we will post a link to Slido again in a Zoom channel, but please do take a screenshot or take a go to the link here. Okay, I will stop sharing now. Yeah, Twitter needs extra privileges these days. Okay, so good. We start.
All right.
All right.
Should we just get started? Should we just get started then?
Yes, we get started. So we have here today in the room, let me pin and pin, add pin. Yay, pinning. Superpowers. So so we start, I guess, with the introduction round. So first introduction, Tiankai, can you give us a brief introduction of yourself?
Absolutely. So I'm Tiankai. I'm work-wise currently the data strategy and data governance lead at ThoughtWorks Europe. It's a consultancy that focuses on data and tech topics. I think Teresa mentioned that one of the workshops is happening in one of the ThoughtWorks offices. So ThoughtWorks is engaged in the community a lot as well and trying to basically participate in these events as well. Personally, I am a father of two with two little boys, 5 and 3 years old. I'm still based around here, also similar as Jasmine, in the same area here, close to Nuremberg, in a small city called Fürth. And yeah, I wrote basically this book, Humanizing Data Strategy, that I didn't expect to ever write, but I kind of got into this opportunity end of last year by the publisher to ask me if I wanted to write ever a book about anything. And this topic about the human side of data was always a passion of mine. So I thought if I write a book about anything, then it's going to be about this. So yeah, I put basically all of my thoughts and ideas from previous talks and keynotes that I gave together, added some more things and some additional ideas into it. And I'm very lucky that now this book launched and it's now out there since a month. And the feedback so far has been pretty good. And I'm very happy to be here to discuss the book. I think this is my very first ever proper book discussion about it and not just promotion in quotation marks. So I'm very happy to be here.
Fantastic. Well, I guess that means I'm the next one, isn't it?
Yes.
Good. So yeah, also for me, first of all, thanks so much for having me. It's really a pleasure. And I mean, let's face it, Tiankai did all the work. So all I wrote was a little forward for all of his efforts. But yeah, who am I and why did he ask me? But maybe he should tell you later on why he asked me, because I mean, it was his idea, not mine. I'm currently working in the financial industry, mainly on topics around data governance, IT compliance, and IT security. So I tend to look more on the broader side of tech and data, but let's face it, there aren't many jobs anymore out there that can work without data. And that's also why I've been passionate about data for quite some time. And Tiankai and I had the pleasure to work together for a while on data topics. That's, by the way, also how we met a while back. Feels like yesterday, but I know it's been a little bit longer than yesterday.
A little bit.
And yeah, I mean, if you ask me why do I think it's important and what was my initial reaction, it fit. And I do admit, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, what would be his first book, it probably would have been something around data. I'm not so sure if it would have been directly linked to humanizing it. I'm not sure. Maybe something with music and data combined, maybe more. But for me, it was a fit because he always had so many ideas around data and on how to connect people, how to connect data and people, and how to make complicated stuff easy. And I think that's also what that book comes down to. And that's also why I think it's an amazing read, honestly. There's no way around data. There's so much data about each and every one of us. There's so much we can do with data. And if someone can explain it in an easy way, I think Tiankai is one of the ones to go to.
Thank you. Very nice. And just to add the context how Jasmine and I got to know each other, we both worked at Adidas before. And I was for the longest time in the analytics side of things and was basically a data product owner and then a capability lead. And we had that one faithful lunch where we met for the first time just to get to know each other. And Jasmine asked me if I would ever be interested in joining the data governance side for the product data side, which I was already working with a lot at that point in time. So I basically said yes. And many years later, not that many years, but a few years later, here we are. So in a nutshell, it's Jasmine's fault that I even wrote the book probably in the first place as one of the reasons. So yeah, it's very nice to have Jasmine with me here. That was also the reason why I asked Jasmine to write the foreword, because she was there from the beginning when I joined the governance and strategy space. And yeah, it's really nice to also do this event together.
Definitely. And I'm still so not sorry for that lunch. So
yeah, it was a good lunch. Cool.
So, but I guess now it's time to really dig into the content, isn't it? So When did you come up with the ideas for the 5 Cs? Maybe we start with that.
Yeah. So I think my very first concept that I applied in reality was when I realized that data governance is very much misunderstood and also is facing a lot of resilience, right? So on the one hand side, the word governance itself is scaring people off most of the time if they have never heard about it. So when governance is knocking on the door, metaphorically, people are probably not going to answer the door, or they open it very small and hope that nothing bad happens. And when they do know about the governance, then there's a lot of, I would say, wrong expectations towards governance too, right? As in, it becomes that basically scapegoat for all of data problems that exist in an organization, right? So data quality problem, it's data governance fault. The data is not available, it's data governance fault, and everything becomes data governance's fault. So what I try to do with my team is we established this concept that I came up with called co-creative collaboration. And the whole idea was that it's not transactional. It's not about one servicing the other, but that two parties from a business stakeholder and a governance side work together towards the same goal with clear responsibilities and contributions from both sides to actually get there. And that was basically already two of the C's that I already applied in my head, so to say, and took as a principle to everything we did and everything that I did. And I think the other ones basically came down a little bit to what I thought was missing to make this collaboration work and make data more valuable. So this whole topic of competence, right, of being able to actually know what you're talking about, know what you're working on. And that doesn't only mean the methodology side of data, but also the subject matter expertise and the business context behind the data, right? It's also about communicating around it, right? Data governance is often miscommunicated or too little communicated. So we established a lot of communication channels and practices on how to talk about progress in data management and data strategy as well. And lastly, conscience, right? As in that we cannot rely completely on technology to automate everything and just hope that in the new world, AI is just going to do all of the governance for us. Because a lot of the decisions we make, it's still followed or following critical thinking on the human side, right? We call it often gut feeling, but it has more to it. I think it's just our brains being able to put the facts together and give us a feeling about something is not right or feels right about it. And basically using that to apply it more to make more human-driven decisions rather than just to leave it all to technology. I realized this is also very important. So all of that together, right, became the 5 Cs for my book. That's competence, collaboration, communication, creativity, and conscience. And the book is basically describing how it looks like in detail for those 5.
And what about the human side of life? I mean, we forget so often about it when we talk about objectives, ambitions, and all of that. Why did you decide, hey, let's add the human to it? I mean, you could have stopped with the 5 Cs.
That is true. I would say that there's this misconception that when we talk about strategic goals and business objectives, that everybody automatically is fully behind them, is fully motivated to drive those. But in reality, not everyone can really relate to these abstract and very far away goals that are set on an organizational level, right? So there's a lot more needed to actually motivate the individual contributors, right? And not just having like a lot of fluffy blah blah about how great it is to work in a company. And that is what I'm trying to do, basically, to say, right, that if you want a data strategy to work, it needs to mean something for individuals too, and not just rationally that it's the right thing to do, but emotionally it does feel like the right thing to do. So that's kind of why I wanted to bring in that aspect. And even in my last, I think in the closing words, I said that none of what I wrote about should feel very groundbreaking because they're all rooted in empathy, right? They're all rooted in our own humanity to say we just can relate to each other and we know how to empathize for each other. But I just try to pinpoint it a bit more and try to apply it at work and in data specifically. So yeah, and that's basically why the human side I think is important. Yeah.
I need to agree to that, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
So before we dive a little bit deeper into the 5 Cs, I'm just checking our Slido. So far, there's no question, but maybe let's take a couple seconds and see if someone wants to ask something before we get any more into depth of the concept. If not, you can always also interrupt us, just keep on adding it there, and we will do our best to get it into the conversation, so no worries there. But while we are waiting for more questions, maybe let's start with competence. I mean, that's a big word.
Yes. I mean, and to be fair, by the way, I called the 5 Cs and to make it sound catchy, right? I think competence could have been any other sequence of words too, but 5 Cs are easier to remember. So there's a little bit of marketing in there too, of course. But what I mean with competence, and I specifically don't call it data literacy, is because I think that data literacy is not enough. I think data literacy is one of those buzzwords where we all felt like as data professionals that the rest of the organization didn't understand that and didn't understand us enough. And but data is now so ubiquitous that actually I feel like it's a little bit one-sided. And that means that as data professionals, we should also take one step towards the other side, meaning that we should become more and gain more expertise on the business expertise and the business context itself, right? Depending on what domains we're working with or what kind of departments we're working with, it should be fair that we learn something about how they work too, and not just expecting them to know how data work, right? And expecting them to do the hard work. So that is the starting point of why I call it competence and not just data literacy, because I think that business acumen, as I call it, is also very important, and it takes a step to go together there. And then beyond that, once actually people are encouraged and empowered to learn and to basically learn about the other side, so to say, there's different ways to do it. I talk about an academy concept, for example, where a group learning and kind of knowledge exchange and cross-functional kind of communities are encouraged. But I also talk about basically what confidence has to do with it too, right? Because you have, for example, the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you're too confident about what you know, or you have the imposter syndrome, where you're not confident enough about what you know. And kind of finding that balance between the two is really key, because if you don't do it, then that can have serious consequences, right? Where either you take the wrong decisions because you're too confident, or you're not brave enough to take decisions because you're not confident enough. Either way, it might not go well. So basically, encouraging people to find that balance, to get validation, but also have a healthy kind of mindset about how they have confidence is really key. And I think the last one is a little bit about career growth, right? And that is basically about if we want people to learn from the other side, then shouldn't we also support their career trajectories to do that too, right? That if a data scientist, for example, learns a lot about a specific domain, and the data scientist now wants to actually work for a few years in that specific department and not in the data team anymore, then that should somehow be allowed and encouraged, right? But in reality, data people are seen as data people and that they don't have enough business experience, right? And vice versa, non-data people aren't seen as not having enough data experience, so they will not the other team. So that belief and that confidence to basically trust in that path is really key there. And this is basically how I think competence plays a big role in the data strategy. Yeah. And the next one is collaboration, right? Jasmine, what do you think why collaboration is important, and what are really the pitfalls and the big challenges around data collaboration nowadays?
Well, if I pick up from where you just left with non-data people and data people, I would even start off with, I don't think there is anyone out there anymore who can say I'm not a data person. Because let's face it, we all fulfill all the different roles in data. We all work with data. We all create data. We all use data in different setups, different ways. There's not a day where we don't handle data, but it's always a team effort. And that's what I love about working with data, honestly, because someone creates it, someone transforms it, someone uses it, people look at it from a different angle, people have different idea about what to pull out of the data. So if you use one data set and you give it to 10 different people, you will get 10 totally different ideas about what to do with it, how to work with it, what you can get out of it, how to make it better, how to make it bigger, and all of that. And I mean, that comes together with the competence. So that's why for me, the 5 Cs, it's always hand in hand. So it's very hard to really say, here's one isolated bucket of it. It comes together like a puzzle. And you can work best in a puzzle when you collaborate. That's at least how I look at it and how I start of it when I think about it. But obviously, when we look into Tiankai's thoughts, who we all see in the book, it's really about finding the right way, connecting the dots, finding the right people, but also about how much service do you want to give? What is the right thing for the data? That was honestly one of my favorite parts where it's like, yeah, doing the right thing. Yeah, but what is the right thing? I mean, when you think back to people have a different agenda. People have different ideas, different ambitions. So what might be the right thing for Kai today might not be the right thing for me today. But if your data set works, if how you set up your ideas, how you really want to work with it, you can use it in all the different ways that are out there. And that works best with collaboration. But that means people need to talk to each other. People need to be open about the ideas of the other, of the perspectives, point of views, all of that. It's about co-creation, working together to really get the best out of it. And that's what I love about it. And I mean, I'm pretty sure we all have seen the lovely ad hoc requests. I have a demand. I have a lovely idea. And everyone's like, so really? Is that a great idea? I'm not so sure. But most of the time, if you're really open about it, and there comes also the human factor again, collaboration works when you are open-minded, when you listen to the idea, even if the first sentence is like, so, nah, that really doesn't feel right. But give it a chance. And that's when collaboration works best. And that's how you really can get amazing success stories out of it. It's a matter of the mindset. It's about really to stay on top of it and talk to each other. I mean, I've never seen a team working or a collaboration working without communication. And it's just, it comes so close together. But on the communication piece, that's, I think, something Tiankai wants to say more about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and with communication, right? It's one of those words that in any data strategy book that you read is always pointed out as important. But I realized that there's not a lot of details usually in those books, right? That it's one of those check the box and just say, okay, communication is important when you do change management. And then you move on to the next chapter, which is very technical, right? And I was trying to, with that book, even fill in a little bit the gaps to say, okay, but what does it mean to actually take communication serious? And I think there's various aspects to it. I mentioned before that I mean by humanizing to address the individual human being and not just the rational side of what it is. And this is why also I'm saying that when you talk about the impact of any data efforts or data projects, that you should not only describe it as the business value of things, but also what the personal reward of it actually is, right? For example, that means that if the business case is higher profitability, right, you're saving some costs, right? That is the overall impact. The middle ground between higher the business impact and the personal reward might be higher productivity, so you can actually reduce the costs. But for a personal reward, for those people, for example, for data scientists who are then actually cleaning up data 5 hours per week before they can actually do anything with it, and they can reduce those 5 hours to do more important things than cleaning data, that is an actual value for the personal productivity that those specific people can really value, right? And I think when you communicate about data efforts, it's about knowing what specific individuals are being impacted about, but also how it links to the business objectives overall. And this way you can actually use different narratives and different stories to address different people to actually intrinsically motivate them to do so, right? I think another side of it is a simple storytelling structure that I'm trying to indicate that basically I believe that roughly there should be a sequence when you talk about your data of efforts or data plans in why, what, and how. Why being even the reason why you do it, right? And that should be something that everybody understands, and it's an undeniable reason why this data effort and data project is important. Then the what of what needs to be done to actually achieve it, right? What decisions need to be done, taken, what tasks need to be done. And then the how is basically the planning, the resources, the OKRs, whatever you want to call it. But my experience is that as data professionals, we're all very passionate about our methods and how we did things, right? Which means we all usually start with thinking about the how and talk about the how, right? Look at all of these great models that I ran, or look at all of the insights I found in the data, and I crunched all of these tables, and now look at what I got out of there. But you're losing the business side of people, right? And you're losing a lot of people that are not actually into the details. So this kind of structure from why and then what and then how, I think could be an overall good approach to talk about it more. So yeah, and that's basically the two main points, I think, in the communication chapter. There are some other ideas in there too. Maybe one of them just to address is stakeholder management, right? I think it's when you in your team sometimes do stakeholder maps, there's definitely this who is an advocate and who is a resistor kind of approach, right? And to manage them. But I feel like that is not enough to only cluster them those, because you need to understand why they're advocates or why they are resisting too, right? And I basically I'm suggesting to cluster your stakeholders into different persona types, right? So for example, you have skeptics versus believers, right? Some people are always skeptic about new things, and some people always love the next new thing, and then you have a lot of people in between, right? But depending on how they tick, you know that you have to talk about it differently, right? The skeptic maybe needs a bit more facts and reasoning to convince them, while the believer almost need to be held back to first basically be on board and not rush into the next thing too quickly, right? And another one could also be that you have doers versus thinkers, I call it, right? Those that actually love thinking and think a lot about it, but actually do not think practically about how to actually then do it, or those that don't think about it at all and just rush into doing it and then regret that they have not thought about it more, right? So those two extremes and then everything in between. But thinking in these kind of types and then clustering and mapping your stakeholders in these different types means you can have a more differentiated approach how to talk to them. And if you can, in your head or even literally for your own notes, kind of map them before you talk to them and you engage with them, then maybe all of your interactions can be a bit more prepared, and then also more productive and more goal-driven and interacting with them. Yeah, so that's kind of the idea behind communication. Yeah, and part of communication, of course, is also, as I just mentioned, right, coming up with things and how to actually come up with the right narrative, which leads to the fourth C, which is creativity. And yeah, so Jasmine, what do you think about creativity as part of a data strategy?
Well, I'm pretty sure creativity was never something you were struggling with.
That's true. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
but joke aside, I mean, if I take a step back, maybe before I go directly back to data and what it means there, if you really look over the last, I don't know, 200 years, maybe even longer, it's very hard to see true evolvement, true development without at least a little bit a piece of creativity somewhere. So if you really want to improve, if you really make something better, if you want to explore other options out there for something great, there's always some piece of creativity behind it. Maybe not always intentional, fair enough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's very, very hard to find true involvement without creativity. And especially when we now think about data, I mean, just maybe think back 10, 15, 20 years from today. The discussions we have today, we would have never had that. About humanizing data, about how to work with data, about artificial intelligence. I mean, it was a handful of people thinking about those concepts. Today, you read it all over the newspapers. Today, people want to work with data. People use ChatGPTs. Most of them don't even know what's really behind from the data concept perspective. But that's fair enough. It gets more accessible. It gets broader. But we only got there because we allowed creativity in that concept. And I do remember, and that, by the way, made me really laugh when I read the book the first time, when Kai came up with the song, The Governors of Data. Maybe a little fun story for everybody here. When we had the interview for Tiankai's job, I kind of teased him and said, but if you really get the job, I want to get a song. And he delivered on both the interview for the job as well as the song. So everybody, if anyone doesn't know the song yet, check it out. You can find it on YouTube. He didn't sing during the interview. Maybe I should have asked for that as well. But he delivered the song afterwards. So no worries, he did. But coming back to creativity, with the little story aside, it's really about being open. It's about working with what you have, looking at it from a different angle and really get to that. And as I mentioned, there are different ways to do that. I mean, it's not always intentional. Sometimes you experiment with stuff. Sometimes you really say, hey, I really want to change things. There are different ways. And that's the important piece. You just need to feel safe enough. That brings us back to the competence. Use the different ideas and inputs you get, and then see where you end up. But you need to allow yourself to do that. And that's also why Kai wrote, like, creativity is like a muscle. So if you never allow yourself to do it, if you never allow yourself to try it, and then at one point in time you say, hey, and now I'm going to be creative. That's going to be a rough job to get that one out of the door. But if you allow yourself here and there to think outside of the box and don't limit yourself, be open-minded and just give it a try here and there. Crazy enough, it becomes a habit, like many things in life. And I truly believe there are worse habits out there than being creative. So why not being it with data? And I'm fairly certain if we look at it, what we do today with data, and we would have the conversation again, maybe in 20 years, it's going to be a completely different story again. Because we are evolving every day with what we do and how we do it. And that only works because we allow creativity. We allow people to change things. We allow people to think outside the box. So why not doing it with data as well? But before Kai is now diving into the last C that we have, I want to call out that we have one question that fits nicely to our last C.
Yep.
Because we have a question about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that it feels like it's being given a backseat for the AI field. And how can we center it again? So let's see, Kai, how you are planning to do that.
Yeah. I basically put and grouped the DEI part in the conscience part of the 5 Cs, right? And I do agree that it's taken a backseat, and it's one of the things where everybody says, yeah, DEI is important again, right? And then the actions actually don't follow, and it's actually not being shown in the actions taken through the data. Especially in AI, though, just to address the question, I do believe that it's probably a question of a lack of definition and a lack of responsibility. Because if you think about it, how at least machine learning works, right? So you have the data foundation, you have the machine learning, and then you learn from historical data, the training data, basically, to then basically come up with the models and with the outcome. But basically, the data that's being trained with, right? You can look at it from the classical data quality sense, right? It should be complete, it should be accurate, and so on and so on. But in this new world of where actually patterns are being recognized for a proxy to human decision-making, other things like bias and discrimination are also important. But there is no, at least as that I know of a method that is clear to automatically detect bias or discrimination on a set of personal data immediately out for you. It's something where you need human oversight to actually check for the things and know and how to spot discrimination bias. And because, first of all, not many people know how to do it. Either you're technically expert, but you're not a DI expert, or you're the AI expert, and then you're not technical enough to look into data patterns. But also, there's no one responsible in any organization to actually do that nowadays, right? It's basically AI developers and data scientists taking the data that's being given to them and then making technically the best out of it and hoping that the outcome is good. So it basically comes down to us all together as a society almost, which I know sounds a bit cheesy, but we have to take responsibility ourselves, right? If we know that no one is doing it, we might as well start, because doing something is better than doing nothing. And at least addressing it, saying that we need to check for discrimination and for bias, and that is fair, right? And if we cannot do it, who can do it? And to actually do that step before it has consequences, I think is really important. And that also, just to circle back to the 5 Cs, right? Conscience is just something that needs to be probably embedded into the data strategy too, which is why I call it out specifically, right? That human decision-making and knowing what is morally right and ethically right and wrong is still something that is evolving and that is embedded in us as human beings. And as much as we try to let AI learn it, we all know that it's not doing it really well yet, right? So that means that from that specific lens, from an ethical point of view, from a DI point of view, from a sustainability point of view, we still make these choices consciously and really responsibly, and embed this in our data strategies. That's kind of the idea behind conscience in that sense.
Yeah. So I would propose we quickly look at the other questions that we have before we leave the 5 Cs again. And one question comes back to Tiankai, what you mentioned earlier, data informed or influenced decisions. So the question is, so Jessica really liked the framing of the data informed or influenced decisions over struggling to be data driven. Can you speak to when one is appropriate over the other? And I think that's a very hard question.
It is a very hard one. I mean, just to provide context, I think that is part of the competence chapter, at least the beginning. I have this degree of influence of data and decision making as a concept, right? Where basically the extreme of not using data at all is just experience driven, right? So based on all of your experience as a human being, you think this is the right choice to make, right? Then you have a little bit more of the let's say data inspired, I call it, which is that you want to have a little bit more than your own gut feeling. So you look for data that at least points in the right direction. It's not exactly giving you the answer in your particular case, but you derive from it that this is probably how you should change your decision. Then you have data informed, which is actually combining on equal level almost what the data tells you with your own expertise, and you kind of combine it and make the right decision. And then at the very end, data driven, which is you leave it completely to data and models being automated to make that decision for you. And all of those 4 things exist today, right? It's not like that this is a really new concept. Like, for example, with data-driven, you have dynamic pricing on e-commerce websites, right? That there's not a human being manually changing prices every few minutes, right? That is an automated process. Whereas if you think about, I don't know, the metaverse, for example, which I know is not as relevant before as a few years ago, but there's no data about it, right? Or at that point, so people just followed their gut feeling to say, this is probably a good thing. So let's all do the metaverse and do NFTs and Web3, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that having said, right? The idea is to have consciously knowing how much data is influencing your decision making. So to answer when data driven or data informed is better, it really depends, right? And that is unfortunately a very consultancy answer, but it does feel like that the degree to which it should influence your decision depends on what data is available, how confident and how comfortable you are with that decision making itself, and how much experience you might have done with good experiences with it, that it empirically actually you can trust it to have more influence in your decision making or not. And it kind of follows a little bit the data maturity curve, right? I mean, for those who might be familiar with an analytics maturity curve, right? You have that descriptive at the very beginning, then you have predictive, and then you have prescriptive. it's a little bit similar to that, right? Where you just leave it to the more advanced version of it to be more and more driving actually things through. So the answer is really let it influence you as much as you feel comfortable doing it, and as long as it leads to success, I would say. That should be the right degree. Yeah.
Sounds like a massive task. Holy boy.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm going to tweak the next question a little tiny bit, because the next question is about if you are a yes sayer or more on a skeptic side to new ideas. But before you give us your point of view, let's tweak it a little bit. You mentioned earlier that you have kids at home. What would your kids tell us when we ask them if you're a yes sayer or skeptic to new ideas?
Interesting. So, yeah, I think where I'm coming from. The reason is that I'm a little bit the more strict parent at home. So it's a little bit of a trick question there. I believe myself that I am not a skeptic. I'm actually the opposite. I love to try out new things. I think I'm curious enough to always try them out, and then I can still make a more informed choice if I like it or not, right? But first, intention is always try it out and see how it goes. With my kids, they have sometimes just stupid or dangerous ideas that might hurt them. So I'm often saying no to them before I let them do it. Like running onto the street or something, like as an example, right? With like cars driving by. So it's a little bit tricky there in a rebellious phase. So I'm feeling like I'm saying no a lot now, and that makes me sound like I'm a skeptic, but I'm protecting them, right? So it's a little bit more the parenting side of me that is there. I do think though that on the more fun side, where when we do weekend plans or like just holiday plans, we do experience new things together as a family a lot. So I think that again is more indicating that I'm more of a yes sayer and trying out new things and curious about new topics. Sure. Yeah. But I want to ask you actually the same question. That is not only for me, that question, I think. Yes.
Well, I'm not sure, but as the book is from you, no, joke aside, all good.
Yeah.
I'm with you that you put it in relation, and I think that's also important on that part. So yes, there are many ideas where I'm very happy say yes to and say, yeah, let's go for it. And I mean, if you look at my career, I ended up in IT
Absolutely.
totally by accident. I already had a completely different job offer when my boss back then called me and said, well, yeah, I had a feeling that you want to leave, but I have actually a different idea, and we think it's time for you to really take over your leadership role. And I was like, so really, how did you come up with that plan? And I would have never ever applied for that job. Looking back, it was how I ended up working with data, just like it was the lunch for Tiankai when we said, it's time for data governance. And I think it's a good idea. And he said yes. And I said yes a couple of years earlier to an idea that just sounded total craziness to me. But looking back, it just made so much sense. Yeah. And it all worked out. And sometimes we need to jump into the uncertainty and just give it a try. But of course, none of us is living in a vacuum or completely perfect world. I mean, there are other factors out there. And we need to take smart decisions. So sometimes it's also good to be skeptic. And everybody needs to find the right balance for that person, that moment, that environment. So there are times in your life where you really need to be brave and jump. And there are times where it's like, so, nope, I'm not going to jump today. Maybe I'm going to take or come back to the idea tomorrow. And that's what I love about ideas. Just because you don't follow up today, it doesn't mean that you cannot follow up on them tomorrow or the day after or the week after. They are there. And what I, for example, do, I'm a huge fan, by the way, I don't have much paper on my desk, so I have pretty much everything digital these days because I'm simply too lazy to carry books or paper with me. I need it all in a digital way.
Yeah.
But it also means that I always have kind of my brain with me. So if I have an idea or if something where I'm like, so let's think about it to a different point in time again. Just scribble it somewhere. It can be a note, it can be an email, it can be a message, it can be whatever works for you. And there might be the point where you say, now it feels right. Now I'm going to say yes. And there might be the point where you say, no, currently it just doesn't feel right. But, and that's my experience, if you keep on coming back to an idea, if it kind of like, so it's like a boomerang, it keeps on coming back and back and back. You need to come up with your own number. But for me, it's like, so when it comes back a couple of times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, then it's like, so something must be to it. Why does it keep on coming back? So maybe there's more to it than I think. And then it's usually time to jump. So I hope that answered the question.
That's a great point. Actually, to add on that, I think while you were talking, I was thinking about the criteria of when I would say yes or no, right? And I think there's actually 2 questions that I always ask when I'm in front of a decision, right? One is, what's the worst that can happen, right? That's number one. And the second one, if the bad thing happens, is it irreversible or not, right? And in most of the cases, luckily, the bad thing, first of all, is not that bad, right? So, I mean, it might just hurt, or you might be sad for a day, and hopefully you just move on. And most of the decisions are irreversible, like even career-wise, right? Let's say you go to a job and you're in a different direction and you really don't like it. But jobs nowadays don't have to be permanent either, right? You kind of just either go back to the previous area and the expertise area you were in, or you go for a different employer. That is all fine nowadays, right? And I realized that when I'm being asked something new to do, right, I go through these 2 questions, and then I basically, if they're not too bad, the answers, then I usually say yes. And just to circle back to the book, right, this is how I even decided to write the book. I mentioned before that I was asked by a publisher if I should write the book or not. If I was a skeptic, I probably would have said, first said, give me 2 weeks to think about it, and I would have said no, right? But I basically said yes within 3 days. So I think that tells a lot about if I'm a yes person or more of a skeptic as well.
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's go back to your book. You are right. I mean, we are here to talk about the book. And one aspect that we haven't touched so far is, I mean, you mentioned earlier that you had different speeches and presentations, and that the 5 Cs kind of evolved over time to where you now ended up with the book. But what you haven't shared with us, like, so where did you actually use it in real life, and what kind of improvement did it actually create in a data strategy for companies? So what impact do you see when you use your own ideas for your own work?
Yeah. I think I would be lying if I said that there was a use case where I create a whole new data strategy and applied exactly all of the 5 Cs and everything I wrote down, and it led to the perfect outcome. It happened more in bits and pieces, that I was able in different roles and different scenarios to apply the principles that I basically came up with. And they showed me that they can actually work. But most of the times, it was not, let's create a strategy from scratch scenarios. It was actually solving a problem, right? When I came up with these things. As I mentioned before, right, there was serious problems of resistance of stakeholders that needed to take responsibility for things, but they didn't even want to have a meeting with me, for example. So basically, I needed to change the narrative, right? I applied communication differently, the whole collaboration aspect, and told them how we can co-create together to deliver something. And it changed actually the way of working and led to a better collaboration. So the immediate impact it had was actually that the blockage was gone and we actually moved forward with something and actually got to do something. In other ways, for example, some people in the team, let's say, were really demotivated and were really unhappy about what they were working on. So applying principles from the competence aspect, right, to say, okay, what do you want to do? What is it something that you always wanted to do, you didn't get to do? Maybe we can somehow shape it into something that where you're passionate about it and where you deliver impact at the same time in your current role. And having that kind of that conversation about individual rewarding things, about motivations, about what competence aspect they need to grow in and what they can learn. We created learning groups, and we could send people to like trainings and these kind of things. that at least helped to solve like an employee dissatisfaction problem, right? And like probably an attrition problem too, if they would just leave if they don't like what they're doing. So most of the things I applied always to solve a problem. So the impact always was that the problem was solved, rather than I can say that it overall was a successful strategy. I think my approach is rather that all of these aspects are proven in my experience that they did something nice. And I believe that in any strategy, that kind of approach could have more good effects rather than bad effects. Yeah, and as you as a leader too, Yasmin, right? In your experience from strategic leadership point of view, like how do you see maybe in your day-to-day how these 5 Cs can have an impact or maybe have had an impact already?
There are so many answers to that question. Honestly, if I look at what I do when I work, I usually prefer jobs, and I have been doing that for many, many years now, is where I can really have an impact with my team. So always been driven by what we do as a team, what impact will it have on a company, what impact will it have on our consumer, what really gets us up in the morning. And it's, at least for me, usually not the salary. I mean, yes, it's an aspect that needs to come as well, but it's really about what can you deliver. And yes, I mean, we focus today on data, but when you really look at the 5 Cs and quickly pretend like Tiankai didn't write a data book, actually those work pretty nice in almost every project, in almost every change, in almost every environment where you want to improve something, where you want to get better, where you really want to have an impact. So if you ask me about my experience, and similar to what you just described, usually different bits and pieces depending on the situation. Sometimes it really comes down to communication, getting the people at a place at the table so that they can share their experience, that they can share their competence, so that people can gain from each other, from working together, from the collaboration piece. And what I've learned, at least all the jobs I had so far in my life, it's that as a team, you can achieve so much more than if you try it on your own. And if you look at the 5 Cs, I mean, when you look at a team, you have different ways of experience, different knowledge at the table. You will work together, you will collaborate, you will communicate, you will, because you want to change something, you really want to have an impact. You're gonna come back with creativity and so on. And so you see, it's so easy for me to get through the 5 Cs and to really say, I would even say it's very hard to work without them. So if you would have asked me like, so if I can give you an example where I didn't use any of them, my speech would have been so much shorter. But that's also kind of what I want to showcase for all of you here is today, that it's like a universal tool. And you can always pick and choose the combination that works best for your situation. It's not like a one size fits all. Sometimes you need a little bit more collaboration. Sometimes you need a little bit more creativity. But at least the way how I read the book, maybe Tiankai says now, oh, what did you read? That's what it's all about. You can build your data strategy. You can get the human connection based on where you are and really find the best fit for the situation. And that's what I love about the framework. And he's not saying no to it. So
yeah,
it seems like I read the right book.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah, and talking about that, maybe then, so you said that, of course, it would be hard to not use any of the 5 Cs, but sometimes you cannot control what others are doing, right? And you can try to make the best out of it. What are some common mistakes and challenges that you have seen that were really basically putting hurdles in your way of driving your strategy and organizations?
Well, if I stick with data, it's sometimes that people don't trust the data. So I had once a project and it was really devastating for the team where they did so much work on data quality, data governance, and really to come up with great idea, how to connect with the customer and all of that. And then they did the first few analytics use cases, came back with the numbers, and the management team was like, so not the numbers we want to see. So we decide we overrule the data. It's like, so, well, why do we have data governance? And I mean, there we even had a team for ethical data use. So they even ticked that box and then decided the data doesn't tell the story we want to hear. So we're not going to take the data. It's like, so, yeah, okay, let's go back to why do we have a data strategy to begin with, maybe?
Yeah.
And that didn't really go wrong due to the 5 Cs, at least. Well, maybe a little bit. Maybe they were a little bit overconfident in their human side of life. But data is created by humans, at least most of the data we work with these days. A lot of the data is used by humans, so humans take decisions based on the data. So the data strategy needs to fit at least a little bit the way the person is looking at the data. And Tiankai, you said earlier, the storytelling. So we need to connect, we need to pick up the person where he or she stands in that moment. It doesn't help when we say, well, as an analyst, here's a perfect graph and we love that picture. No, 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 no. If the recipient of the story doesn't get what we want to tell them, the data strategy can be as good as it want to be. It's going to be a theoretical exercise. And that's why it's always important that you ensure that the data results and the data strategy that you have is fit for purpose. And the purpose will change over time. So that's also why you need to adjust and adapt. The data strategy will need to change. At least I believe there's not one out there that you write once and it's going to be fit perfectly in 20 years. I don't believe that. And I think when I look at where do things go wrong and where does it really work, those would be the ones where I'm like, so, and we need to be careful there. But with the 5 Cs, you can impact all of that. With the communication, you can connect with the people where they are. With the creativity, you can find a solution to whatever issue you have, and so on and so on. And that's why I said, for me, it's so nice. And when you look at stakeholders that are hard to tackle, give them a real life example out of their life. And then usually you are able to open a little door to their data mindset. And then you can take it up from there.
Absolutely. And on that actually example that you just talked about, did you derive any learnings from it on how to generally deal with skepticism and resistance? Because, I mean, skepticism and resistance from the very top is very hard, I would also admit, right? But have you basically learned anything and have you have any advice how to actually prevent it in future cases? What would your approach be?
My recommendation there is take it serious. And then really give them real life example that they can relate to. Because usually if they make an experience on their own time, at their own speed, they will get a connection and then you can start working with that. But for that, you first need to accept there is resistance, there is skepticism, and it's okay. Not everybody needs to be a data fan. But it's then our job to give them a chance to change their mind. And everybody needs a different trigger for that. But my experience, it's usually easiest when they kind of on their own pace get to the point where like, so, oh yeah, that makes sense. It's sometimes, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying senior management is always like a kid, but sometimes it's a little bit like working with kids. some experience, they need to make their own mistakes. They need to figure out, oh yeah, that works. Oh, that's how it looks like. Oh, that's what's happening. And where I have had amazing results is really with workshops where we gave them data sets to play with. And simply said, you know
Nice.
what, give it a try. And most of them were quite happy to do it.
Very cool.
What about you? How do you work with skepticism and resistance in your job?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I do actually, I think I didn't put it into words as nicely as you did, but this whole making them relate to something and then using that as a vehicle to actually gain their confidence back and their trust into data actually is a good way. So in that way, I usually, if I don't know anything about them, I usually use a personal finance example, as in, right, that everybody has a bank account and gets income and has expenses. And if you wouldn't know what is happening, right, I don't think that would feel good, right? And same as we're treating business KPIs as tracking all of that on an organizational level, is you tracking your own bank account and knowing how you can optimize your expenses and keep more money to invest in the important things in life, right? Similar as that. But often, if I do my networking in the right way and do more personal things about them, then I can maybe be a bit more tailored, right? If I know that they're parents, then I can talk about how to basically manage stakeholders like kids, as you just nicely put as an example, right? If I know that they have specific hobbies, I can talk about how they, for example, if they like surfing, then I would talk about steering the surfboard as something like steering the business and use analogies like the waves and the ocean and blah, 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 blah. I can get creative, basically, using something they can relate to then address in the right way. I think it's you're right about taking it seriously, but for me, then taking it serious means really thinking what I can talk to about with that specific person to change minds individually. I don't think any generic messaging is gonna do it then, right? You need to actually really go deep on that specific person's problems and their challenges with it, and then trying to change its mind very empathetically. And that's the only way to do it, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. They are human beings. And I mean, we are talking about humanizing data strategy, aren't we?
Exactly. Yeah.
But if you do all of that, how can an organization actually measure the success of a data strategy?
The good old KPI question, I would say. Yes.
Of course.
Of course, the more strategic it gets, the more the difficult it gets to measure impact, right? That's, I think, everybody knows that who works in data. I would say, though, that a good data strategy, in my point of view, is all very much tied to business objectives. And if they are tied to business objectives in a normal organization, you have KPIs already that are quantifying the business objectives being met or not, right? And that might be financial metrics, it might be employee satisfaction metrics, it might be productivity metrics, but the data strategy should enable to achieve basically those objectives, right? So in the end, what I believe should be the right metrics are if those initiatives on data side contributed to those business objectives and those KPIs being met or not. And I don't think there should be a lot of additional KPIs. They might be operational for you to be able to basically optimize your data efforts, but the actual outcome that should be measured on high level should be closely linked to the existing big strategic KPIs that exist. And that should be the indicators. Now, if we talk a little bit more maybe about operational ones, I believe that in those 5 Cs, you could derive a lot of KPIs from there if you want to take it serious, right? Simply said, let's say in competence, and you're basically training people, you could say how many of those people have taken trainings and how many of them can say that they actually applied them in their day-to-day, right? To basically have that conversion from theory to practice, right? If you talk about communication, you could say that you created a communication plan and how much engagement did we get to our communication, right? Were we able to create better conversations afterwards? Were people more aware of data strategy afterwards and these kind of things? So I think you can break it down to a lot of smaller things too, to really also measure the success of your specific actions as well.
Nice one. So let me quickly check. I think we have one more question, at least currently open.
Mm-hmm.
What would you recommend to a data leader to do if in their company the official strategy is profit? Oh, love it.
Yes. Do you want to start, maybe, Desmond, with that one?
Honestly, if I'm the data leader and I'm told it's all about profit and it doesn't matter how we get there, and as long as the number is big and every year gets bigger, I would probably give them a real life example on how much profit they're going to lose if they don't get the data piece right. Because if someone is really a numbers person and driven by money, because let's face it, profit is money, right?
Yeah.
So if someone is really focused on money, 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 then simply show them how much money they're going to lose by not getting it right, by not giving it the attention, by not investing in it. Because let's face it, data is one of the few assets a company will have that it can spend again and again and again, because it doesn't go away, at least as long as you don't delete it. So you can use it for all the different use cases if you do it right in the beginning. And if you look at raw materials, if you look at people, if you look at money, you can spend it only once. With data, not. Data is an amazing asset. And usually, once they understand that concept, for them is data almost equal to profit. What do you think?
Yes, I fully agree with that. I think that I always say there's like two ways of then addressing it, right? One is proving how great of an enabler data is, right? To say, look at how great of an asset data is. But if that doesn't work, then it's the opposite, which I call doomsaying, right? So if you don't do it, look at what will happen then, right? And that usually then goes to legal challenges and regulatory pressure and compliance aspects, which is the other side of data management, that is also data strategy, that is very important, right? And especially in Europe, I believe that all the companies are very much aware and very sensitive about their compliance, and they all know that legal trouble is never good trouble, because that doesn't only have a money impact thing of fines, but it has a huge branding problem too, if companies get into a very public legal problem, right? So addressing as in, okay, if you don't get your data governance right, for example, or you're basically being transparent enough to manage your data in a more transparent and good way, then you might be uncompliant with this law, which could lead to millions or billions of a fine. Is it not worth to you to invest a little bit more to protect yourself against it, or do you just want to face it, right? So that could be a very straightforward question to it. So in that way, profit is then directly put against legal and long-term problems, right? And that could be a nice equation to put the leader in front of. But the honest answer probably is, if that would be the strategy, I probably would leave the company. To be very honest, I don't think I'm going to stay there if that would be the strategy on a personal level.
Come on, we need to give everybody a chance to grow. And if they need help to understand the concept, we should at least try, right?
Okay. I mean, I would not leave immediately, but you know what I'm saying.
And not today, but maybe tomorrow. I get it. I get it.
Exactly. Oh, cool.
I guess that brings us closer to the end of our conversation, meaning, I mean, you mentioned earlier when we kicked off a little bit over an hour ago that so far you received good feedback for your book and that you are quite happy about all of that. But what has been the best feedback, and how does it influence how you are thinking and how you are working and how all of that journey feels like?
Yes. The best feedback, and also the most surprising and touching, I think, was when a few people pointed out that when I talk about my motivations of writing the book, like in the very first chapter of introducing in it, I do talk a little bit about my heritage and why it motivates me to be the way I am, right? So basically being of Chinese ethnicity, but being born and raised in Germany and having felt like an outsider all my life, right? So basically looking different in Germany, but then behaving very different in China too. So either way, I was always basically the foreigner, so to say. But I took all of that energy of being different to build bridges, right? And try to make things more inclusive and to always understand the other side more, to then know if I can understand the other side, they probably will make an effort to understand me too. And that was kind of always in me. And yeah, that basically is my motivation why I then wrote that book, right? Rooting this in building bridges on bringing people together. And that is all what the Humanizing Data Strategy is about. But people that didn't know me at all, right? That just bought the book because someone maybe have recommended it to them, and they sending me an email or a message that this is the part that touched them the most, and they can really relate to this, and they can now actually realize how their own origins and heritage can drive them to apply their personality at work more. That has been, I think, the most amazing feedback, because for some reason, I didn't really see it that way. When I wrote it, it was for me intuitive to write it the way I would write it, right? But for many, it seems like the motivation part and the heritage part is across all of the rest of the 5 Cs. And that for them makes it very personal and relatable to them as well. So yeah, that has been the best thing. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it changed my way of working, maybe. I think I'm just more conscious about why I do the things I do. But I know that's the right things to do. So it gave me a little bit more of a positive motivation, actually, to continue my way of doing things, I would say. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to close it, right, Jasmine? What personal insights or takeaways have you gained from my book or from the discussion today?
Quite a few. Let's maybe start from the discussion today.
Mhm.
The more time we spend talking about your books, the more certain I get there will be a second book.
Okay, no pressure. I'm still recovering from the first book, but it's okay.
Well, maybe we should stop talking about it.
True. I mean, talking about it is still nicer than writing it, but that's a different story. Yeah.
Why am I saying it like that? Not to increase the pressure. That's definitely not the plan behind it, but just listening to the different ideas, the different ways of thinking. I think there's so much more to data still out there that people are struggling with, the different challenges we are all facing. And looking back at what you accomplished with the book, with the 5 Cs, and creating, let's say, 5 boxes that people can put the different things into, can connect them and say, okay, maybe I need a little bit more collaboration today. Maybe I need a little bit more creativity today. Maybe communication is going to be the piece. It makes it easier to grasp, and with that, it makes it easier to digest. And I think having a tool set that empowers you to or encourages you, or maybe both, on your data journey is amazing and is important. And maybe that's also why we need a second book.
Thank you. Very nice.
And I'm not saying we need it within the next couple of weeks, but no, I really think, and that's also for me one of the insights, take time to always get back to the fundamental basics. And having a proper data strategy is a fundamental basic.
Yeah.
It's not the sprinkles on the ice cream.
Yeah.
If you don't get that one right, you will struggle so hard along the way. And it's worth investing the energy, it's worth investing the time, it's worth reading the book, it's worth applying the 5 Cs. And for that, I'm pretty sure it was also worth for Tiankai to write the book.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very well put. I will think about the second book. I think I like actually Teresa's ideas already about the coloring pages, additionally for therapeutic reasons in between the book, or adding some music to it, which actually you even talked about, Jasmine, right? That I could maybe combine music and data also as a book. Let's see. I'm gonna start being creative again soon. As said, I'm recovering from all the late nights and weekends of writing the book still, which has not been easy. But soon.
No pressure. And I mean, if you really want to dream big, you could also make a musical out of it.
Oh, yes.
That would definitely
I love
address a
it.
completely different target audience.
Yes. Okay. It would also give me the a nice chance to work with other data-affine musical actors potentially. So let's see where this is going.
I'm looking forward to it, but I'm not gonna sing for you. I write
Yeah.
the forward, but I'm not gonna sing
All
for
right.
you.
You could be the narrator, maybe. I think that could be nice. Cool.
Good. Any more questions from any of you out there?
I would like to thank you very much for attending this event. And while announcing that there's still a raffle going on, I posted the link. We will post the link again. So you still have some time to get a free copy of the book. I'd like to say thank you to the questions today were written by, drafted by Doreen Saker. She's not in the call today, but she's from the PyLadies Berlin, and she's running the Unmute IT podcast. So we thought this asking questions is a skill. And then also Maria Jose, who's in the call today, she saw on LinkedIn Tiankai's book, and she's like, "Oh, we should do this meetup. What about it?"
I
And I'm like,
see.
"Oh, I'm connected with him." So I could...
Thank you, Maria. Very nice.
Yes.
Oh, there it is. Nice.
Got one too.
Cool.
Okay.
Very
And
nice.
to close things off, while people are still like maybe still have some questions that they can ask and thinking about it really hard and or entering their data for the raffle, I have something to share.
Did you ever wonder what data governance is all about? Well, listen up. DATA, letters that we live by. In a world that's digital, we chose the data life. Enterprise-wise, the data flows left and right. We are the ones who keep it all in our sight. Rules, policies, principles, guidelines. Not the most sexy, but better than the stop signs. Working the segue between business and tech. 1 foot in each world, all data in check. Data quality, data quality. No day goes by without this terminology. We know end-to-end how data works best. We set up the rules and the business does the rest. Governance of data, defect terminators. Good data comes first and the rest will follow later. We know what is right, so let's make the data flow. We're role models of excellence. Let's govern it, let's go. Still not clear what data governance means. Here are some analogies to make you understand. If data is the force, then we're the Data Council. Using it well, that's one of our main goals. If data was a country in a world full of humans, we'd be in the embassy working on solutions. We're running marathons where the data flows, governing holistically in every column, every row. We're not the police, but we are data Sherpas. With our help, there's no hurdle that you can't pass. We might be nerds, but just the good kind. We can do great things even more than these rhymes. Governance of data. Governance of defect terminator. Defect terminator. Good data comes first, and the rest will follow later. We know what is right, so let's make the data flow. Make it flow. We're role models of excellence. Let's go. Let's go. You made it here. This is the third verse. Are you ready for some governance buzzwords? People, process, projects, and tools. Automation starts with business rules. Data models, solution designs. A data catalog helps us to simplify. Master, reference, and metadata. Overviews are good, but governance is greater. System updates and new integrations will design solutions with standing ovations. Governance is cool, you got that right. In the name of data, hands up and high five. Governance of data. Governance of data. Defect terminator. Good data comes first, and the rest will follow later. We know what is right, so let's make the data flow. We're role models of excellence. Let's govern it, let's go. Governance of data. Defect terminator.
I mean, this is how it starts, right? Next is going to be a concert in a...
I have actually, just on that note, first of all, that is like the unexpected most successful song I've ever written. It has like 40,000 views or more on YouTube, which I've never thought any song about data governance would ever achieve, right? So, and it's like 2.5 years old at this point in time. But a few fun things that did happen because of the song, because it created that wave of data governance people all relating to it and feeling understood and being represented all of a sudden, that there were some people that reached out to me if they could get an instrumental version to perform the song in their own team meetings on town halls. And that happened 3 times. So I had actually people do it, and they sent me afterwards videos of them doing it, which is like only celebrities feel like this, right? When people are covering their songs and performing them in their own ways. So I'm very, very happy about that part as well. Like that is an unexpected effect that that song actually had. So it's very cool.
So the karaoke version, yeah.
I mean, I have it as an MP3. I don't have it really. I mean, I could though. I can just upload it, right? I mean, and then people could just
with the lyrics. Like,
I will do that. That's great. I'm taking a note. Love that idea. I can even like give it to the world and let people do whatever they need to do with it.
Like, you know, you have on Spotify that the lyrics appear so that you can sing songs.
Yes. Great idea. Okay.
This is, yeah, A Star is Born. We encourage this. So
Thank you.
in this event. Yeah. So the raffle is open. You can like sign up. Whoever wants to sign up, we will reach out via email. And does anybody else want to say something? There's a message. There was a message from Ashley in the chat. As someone who wants to work in data governance and also a musician, this is something I never imagined, but I love it. So I would also like to thank Yasmin for doing such a great job at asking Tiankai a lot of questions and also answering a lot of, giving her insights in from her experience. I think this was a really nice format. And thank you also, Tiankai, for joining with this.
Absolutely.
And on this hot day in Germany, you know, at least.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
Yes, I think this was a really nice event. I feel like even just because I've only heard about PyLadies through Catherine Jamo before, right, as well, but I never joined any of the events. But then being asked to join and knowing what PyLadies stand for and everything, I think it's a really nice community. So it's really an honor to be able to talk about the book here with this group of people. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for organizing it. It was really a pleasure.
And of course, everybody can connect with Tiankai on all of his socials. You will find him everywhere, LinkedIn and YouTube. You can follow him. And yeah. So thank you very much.
All right.
Gonna stop the stream.
Stop the stream.